Thank you very much, Vanessa, for the introduction. Yes, we all hate plastics. Here you can see a picture that I took at a climate strike in Zurich, and you can see that people are demanding from Coop and Migros to stop using plastics. Migros tries to fulfill the wishes of its customers and works hard to reduce plastic in its packaging and replace it with other materials. There are even shops that do not use plastic packaging at all, like Chez Mamie at Schaffhauserplatz in Zurich. And on social networks, there are uncountable movements against plastics. So how bad is plastic? To start, I will give you a very brief introduction about this material, which actually is not one, but a number of different materials with very different properties. And there are problems related to plastics. Plastics end up in the environment. And this can lead to animals being strangulated or has other consequences that are very difficult to assess. From Switzerland each year, about 80,000 tons of plastic waste are exported. And they are partly exported to countries from which, again, huge plastic amounts are exported to countries with insufficient waste management systems. And so far, it has not been possible to trace whether Swiss plastic waste is further exported and might end up in the environment. Plastics also contribute to climate change. According to a recent study, 4% of the global greenhouse gas emissions were caused by plastics. And mainly the plastics production and incineration at their end of life creates greenhouse gases. Plastics can also have health risks. According to the study of a colleague of mine, up to 10,000 different chemical substances are used in plastics. A part of these has hazardous properties. For example, they are carcinogenic, mutagenic, or toxic to reproduction. And for a large share of these substances, the health properties have not been well researched. But what is important if we want to tackle these problems is to know what causes them. And what is also important is to know how big these problems are in relation to other human environmental impacts. Regarding plastics in the environment, in Switzerland, almost 2/3 of all plastics that end up in the environment stem from tire abrasion. The export amounts that I have shown you, for which the possibility that they end up in the environment cannot be excluded, they constitute only about 10% of the total Swiss plastic waste. And the rest is treated by the well-functioning waste management system in Switzerland. So if we reduce plastic packaging in Switzerland, this has no effect on the amounts of plastic in the ocean or in soils. If, however, we reduce individual transport and we use shared transportation or public transportation means instead, this does reduce the amount of plastics in the environment. Regarding climate change, only about 5% of the total oil and gas consumption is attributable to plastics. The rest is directly incinerated for heating and transportation purposes. So our plastics consumption contributes only a minor share to climate change compared to other human activities. So now I have put the problems related to plastics into a relation and tried to show you their main causes. But why do we even use plastics? Plastics allow for manufacturing a lot of useful products which would be difficult to produce from other materials. For example, functional clothing, household items, tools for which the electric insulation properties, for example, of plastics are very useful, smartphones, or medical applications. Compared to other materials, plastics can even provide environmental benefits. Plastics allow for fuel savings at transportation, for example, if they are used in passenger vehicles instead of metals, or if they are used for packaging. And this is due to their high strength to weight ratio, which allows to provide the same functionality at reduced weight, and thus to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. Plastics can also increase the lifetime of food, which is very convenient because it allows for food storage, and this again allows to consume the food in a different location than the location in which it was produced. And the substitution of plastics with other materials, which is nowadays often envisioned, does not automatically need to be environmentally advantageous. This is shown by this last example. A cotton bag, for example, needs to be reduced 50 to 7,000 times to be environmentally advantageous over single-use plastic bags. Now, what do I do regarding the topics I've talked about? The goal of my work is to reduce the environmental impact caused by plastics that I have shown you, in order that we can keep benefiting from plastics use. And I want to do that by increasing recycling. How do I want to do that more specifically? I am designing future plastic recycling scenarios for Switzerland with minimum environmental impact. And to become a bit more concrete, the method that I'm using is called material flow analysis. Material flow analysis always investigates a specific system, which is defined by a system boundary. And it consists of different processes which are connected by the material flows. In reality, a material flow analysis looks like this. My system was defined by products, plastic products that were used and arose as waste in Switzerland in 2017. And the processes that I've considered were all stages of the plastics life cycle. Here you have an overview of the material flows that I have considered more on a detailed level. I have considered all main application areas of plastics, and for each application area, I have included the main plastic types that are used in this area. And each application segment I further subdivided into a number of subsegments, so that in total I have distinguished 54 subsegments. And here you can exemplarily see the subsegments of the packaging segment. Here you have some results of this first part of my study. On the left, you can see the relative recycling rates of the different product segments. On the coordinate and on the abscissa, you can see the waste amount of each of these segments. You can see that we have the highest recycling rate for electrical and electronic equipment, followed by packaging, from which we also have the highest waste amount, which in total gives the by far largest amount of secondary material corresponding to this area here. And where this secondary material is used, you can see on the right side, you can see that the largest share goes back into the packaging segment. This is attributable to the fact that the PET drinking bottle recycling works very well in Switzerland and reaches high recycling rates, and the respective secondary material that is gained from this recycling can be used to produce drinking bottles again, which belong to the packaging segment. But also, for example, tertiary packaging films are recycled back into packaging films. A large share of the secondary material is also used in the building and construction segment, but also other product segments take up secondary material. And based on this analysis of the current system, I am now modeling different future scenarios for Switzerland, considering, for example, new sorting technologies, which allow for gaining secondary material with different properties. And this again might allow to use the secondary material in additional product segments than the ones in which it is used today. What are my conclusions regarding plastics consumption based on the work that I've conducted so far? I think we should use plastics sensibly. We should use plastics for purposes in which they are useful, and we should treat plastic waste appropriately. So we should prevent it from reaching into the environment, and we should recycle as much as possible, as recycling tends to be environmentally advantageous compared to other waste management options. To minimize the health risks, we should substitute hazardous plastic additives with non-hazardous alternatives where this is possible. And another aspect that I consider very important is that we should try to avoid inequality related to plastics consumption worldwide. So we should make sure that the environmental impacts that are connected to plastics production do not arise only in certain countries, while other countries only benefit and profit from plastics consumption. And we should also make sure that no workforce is exploited for plastics production. Here you have the name of the research project in the context of which I have conducted and I am conducting my work, the Clean Cycle project, and the names of my two supervisors, Melanie Haupt and Stephanie Hellwig. And with this, I thank you very much for your attention.